On December the 25th, 800, Charlemagne, king of the Franks, was crowned Holy Roman Emperor by Pope Leo III in Rome. This title, with a few exceptions, would continue to be used by the most powerful rulers in Europe, all the way until the 19th century. But the heart of Charlemagne's empire was mostly in what we now call France, whereas the Holy Roman Empire that came after was centered here, in a place that is definitely not France. So what changed? Why did the core Frankish lands of Charlemagne end up separated from the territories ruled under his title? In 768, the kingdom of the Franks was ruled by King Pepin of the Carolingian dynasty, and at that point, he conveniently passed away. He left the kingdom to his two sons, Charles and Charlemagne, who, according to Salic inheritance law, split the kingdom between them. Charlemagne would rule his part for the grand total of 3 years, before he suddenly died, and Charles inherited everything. Charles then spent the next few decades greatly expanding the Frankish realm, until the year 800. At that time, Pope Leo III had been driven out of Rome, and he asked Charles to come restore him, which Charles did. Soon after, the Pope crowned him Holy Roman Emperor. That's how Charles earned the name, Charles the Great, better known as Charlemagne. Following more conquests, and some pushback from Constantinople about the new title, Charlemagne eventually passed away, but he only had one surviving son, so the empire stayed unified. That son's name was Louis the Pious, and unlike his father, Louis had several sons. And when Louis died, those sons went to war with each other. For the next 50 years, the empire would be split, briefly reunified, and then split up again. Eventually, the title of Holy Roman Emperor fell out of use altogether. In the eastern part of the empire, the Carolingian kings were replaced by Saxon rulers, and eventually, power was taken by King Otto, whose father had changed the rules of succession so that everything would go to just one heir. Otto went on to conquer the Kingdom of Italy, and while he was there, he convinced the Pope to crown him Holy Roman Emperor. Otto ruled like an autocrat. He didn't care about family ties or bloodlines. What mattered to him was loyalty. As such, titles and positions of power were given to his closest allies and friends, who were mostly German. The old Frankish nobility was gradually replaced by Saxons, Bavarians, and Swabians. Thanks to Otto's strong authority, he was able to turn the western region into something of a puppet state. But not long after Otto died in 973, the region rose up against his son and won its independence. Soon after that, Hugh Capet became king there, bringing an end to Carolingian rule and cutting the last major threads connecting the two realms. The new Capetian dynasty held the title of king, but in practice, they were quite weak. The kingdom itself was highly fragmented, with noble families holding immense power. It wasn't until the 12th century, under King Philippe Augustus, that this situation was turned around. But by then, the title of Holy Roman Emperor was no longer seen as Frankish. It was considered purely German, and the Holy Roman Emperors never tried to bring France under their control again after King Otto, because, as anyone familiar with the Holy Roman Empire can tell you, it had plenty of its own problems. Its borders were constantly threatened, from the north, east, and south. Inside the empire, lords fought for control over the imperial crown, and the emperor frequently clashed with the pope for ultimate authority. And when the pope and emperor actually got along, it usually meant it was time for a crusade. The only time after this, when the two realms came close, even technically, if you squint, to uniting again, was during the reign of King Francis. In 1519, Emperor Maximilian died, and the electors of the empire had to choose a new ruler. The candidates were his grandson Charles I of Spain, Henry VIII of England, and Francis I of France. The electors, of course, were looking for whoever could bribe them the best. Francis had the Pope's support, and offered land and money to the electors, who would back him. But Charles, as Maximilian's chosen heir, already held vast lands and commanded strong armies. Within the Holy Roman Empire, he also paid enormous bribes. Henry soon realized he couldn't compete financially and dropped out. In the end, Charles's military strength in the empire, along with his promise to leave it alone so he could focus on ruling Spain, won him the title. Francis made a strategic mistake. He paid his bribes before the election, so the electors took the money and then voted for Charles anyway. After that, there was no more chance of the two uniting again, and from then on, they remained separate. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks for watching.